In this video, we are breaking down 5 running backs that I believe the market and everybody talking about them has the wrong opinion on, and here's why. And we'll start with Tony Pollard. Now, this could be they're wrong because they're too high or they're too low on the guy. I just think that the opinions are maybe a little bit groupthink, everybody's saying the same thing and just believing it. But for Tony Pollard, I think people are wrong on disliking him to the amount that I'm seeing in drafts right now. And let me address the concerns because they're valid. Last season, his first season as the full-on starter in Dallas, and he didn't do too great. You can see right here, Pollard only averaged 4.3 yards per touch according to Player Profiler. That ranked 44th in the NFL. And if you're familiar from past seasons, he was always right around a top 10 player in these metrics. His juke rate, which is how often he's breaking a tackle per carry, just 38th in the NFL, which, you know, is below average in terms of starting running backs or just running backs seeing around 40 to 50% of the snaps. So what changed for Pollard? Well, there's the obvious fact that with Ezekiel Elliott gone last year in Dallas, Pollard saw a larger workload. And when you see more touches, you're just going to become naturally less efficient over time. But maybe there's something else that can account for Pollard's bad season. Like, it came out of nowhere. It's not like this guy was getting older, and that's something could be an injury. Because Pollard did end up having ankle surgery, tightrope surgery to be exact, at the beginning of the year. This was in January of 2023. You can see right here is when the article was written. So he had surgery in mid to late January on his ankle. And now in general, if it's a clean recovery and everything goes right, he should have been back in like 4 to 6 to 8 weeks at most. And by all accounts in the preseason and camp, everything seemed to be fine, but maybe if it wasn't physical pain that he was feeling, there was some sort of mental issue going on with Pollard surrounding this injury specifically, because at the end of the year when it was like Super Bowl week and there was a bunch of media, he did a couple of different interviews, and in one of them he said that he felt lost a little bit when it came to just figuring out how to explode his explosiveness as a running back after that tightrope surgery. We've heard a lot of quarterbacks have this, but they don't rely on explosiveness as much as a running back will, so this is some good information that we got from Pollard after the surgery. And if that's how he was feeling, there's a mental component. Maybe there was a physical component. It wasn't rehabbed properly. It just wasn't back to full strength in time to take on that full workload that he really never experienced at any point in his career. So the Cowboys decided not to sign Tony Pollard, and he ends up going to the Tennessee Titans on a 3-year deal worth nearly $22 million. Now, he's joining a Titans team that on paper isn't going to be as good of an offense as the Dallas Cowboys where he's coming from, but if anything, they are improving, or at least they're trying to do so, right? They signed Tony Pollard himself. They go out and get Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd to pair up with DeAndre Hopkins. It's all going to come down to their new quarterback, Will Levis, who they also surrounded with some new offensive linemen as well. So you have Pollard's down year last year. Now he's going to a brand new team. He's aging a little bit. These are some of the concerns as to why people have an opinion that I believe is wrong, that he's not really a great pick this year. And another big concern is the fact that he joins a backfield where there's Tyjae Spears, an exciting second-year player who was able to steal 50% of the snaps from Derrick Henry himself last year. And Spears, as a rookie, ranked top 10 in yards per touch, kind of like the vintage Tony Pollard from a couple of years back. And I compare him to Tony Pollard because honestly, they're very similar backs, both in size, the way that they win, they're quality pass catchers, and their own coaches multiple times this offseason have viewed them as interchangeable pieces. Now, I like Spears. I'm not going to go back on that. I've talked about it in multiple videos. I think that he has league-winning upside if he can earn this role, or if Tony Pollard just ends up missing some games based on where he's going right now as like a 10th round pick or later in drafts. He's an exciting, explosive, young, that's the big one, second-year player. So there's no doubt that Spears should be a value in his own right in drafts, but that doesn't mean Tony Pollard can't either, because look at this right here. He currently goes 91st overall. In a lot of drafts, this is like the 8th or the 9th round, depending on how many people are in your league. And in my opinion, that's just wrong. I think based on the money he's getting paid, he's an RB1A on this team, meaning the starter day one. We'll split the snap, sure, somewhat with Tyjae Spears, but the starter from day one when all these guys are healthy and out there. And you can argue that he's actually behind a better offensive line. These offensive lines between Dallas and Tennessee were pretty comparable last year, and then Dallas heading into this year lost like 4 of their starting offensive linemen. Meanwhile, the Tennessee Titans draft J.C. Latham with a top 10 overall pick. They go out and sign Lloyd Cushenberry as center, who's probably going to be an upgrade for their line over Aaron Brewer, who ends up leaving. You can see right here in free agency. Andre Dillard leaves, signs with the Packers. Not the biggest overall loss. I think they got a better offensive line now, probably a top 15 to top 12 unit in the run game. So when we factor in all these things, that's why in the fantasy blueprint, the risk-free blueprint, a couple thousand people have it right now. If you want to check it out, Tony Pollard's my 74th overall player. He goes 94th, 91st, depending on the platform you're looking at. So I'm about 20 spots or 2 rounds ahead on Tony Pollard right now. I still think he's a quality option. Let's just say you're in the 8th round and guys like Jalen Warren and or Jonathan Brooks are gone. That's when I start to look towards Pollard if I want a running back. So Pollard's one running back that I just think people have the wrong opinion on. And the next guy, he's actually a similar aged veteran. We have to go now to Green Bay. And this is where I want to talk about Josh Jacobs, who it's been kind of an up and down, a roller coaster, a fun offseason for him. Because first off, well, he ends up not re-signing with the Raiders and he's a Green Bay Packer. And that's right, he's a Packer. If you're just jumping back into the fantasy research, he's no longer a Raider, a Packer, welcome back. And there was like this 30 to 60 minute window where both Josh Jacobs at 26 years old and Aaron Jones at 29 years old were on the Green Bay Packers, and everyone was like, man, neither of these guys are going to be good for fantasy, then none of them are going to have a breakout season, and kind of that's your anchoring bias, your first opinion that you have on this player. But then within like an hour later, it comes out, Adam Schefter puts out that running back Aaron Jones is not going to be there anymore with the Green Bay Packers. He was released per a source. There was like just a dispute on his contract. They wanted him to take arguably 50% less money. Some places had it as $1 million less, and he said, no, I'm just going to go somewhere else. So now things start to look good for Josh Jacobs. He's getting a workhorse role on an offense with a better quarterback, a better coach, in my opinion, especially in the run game, Matt LaFleur, who gets his tight ends and wide receivers involved in blocking to help the backfield. But then the roller coaster continues of this offseason after like 4 to 6 weeks later, or maybe a little bit less than that, when the Packers draft in the 3rd round, the 4th running back off the board. So significant draft capital in a running back in Marshawn Lloyd, who is a bigger running back out of college. This is somebody that weighs about 220 pounds, ran in the 4.4s as well. So really solid athleticism. And then we could look at what Lloyd did last year in his final year of college, and we'll talk about some of his pros and his cons. Last year, if you look at what he did as a rusher and then you factor in his receiving, so 820 rushing yards, factoring in his receiving yards of over 200. Okay, he had over 1,000 yards last year at USC when he transferred in somewhat of a split backfield. Again, a bigger back, 220 pounds. He's kind of like the Josh Jacobs, but probably a little bit faster in terms of a player coming out of the draft. And another big pro to his game was he ranked 4th last year in missed tackles forced per touch, which correlates strongly to the NFL. But there are concerns for Lloyd. He had fumbling issues in college, and his vision is questionable. Despite this, a lot of people started to not like Josh Jacobs as much anymore, and this is still holding for a lot of people. And then these types of quotes from Matt LaFleur this offseason have people even more worried. He said on his running back rotation, typically we like to platoon these guys, using 2 or 3 of these guys. So everybody takes this quote, they start going crazy, but what they ended up missing, and this is why it's a really big mistake in my opinion to just look at this quote and not the whole thing, and this was a good job by the Coach Speak Index to kind of clip the entire quote. It starts off by Matt LaFleur saying, I do think he's very capable of being a high volume, big there for fantasy, feature back where he's getting the bulk of the carries, but we'll see how it plays out. And this is similar to something that Matt LaFleur echoed earlier on in the offseason when they signed Jacobs, also said that he could be definitely a pass catching back. So that's what I think is going to happen. He's the clear running back 1 here. Yes, the rookie can be involved. Yes, A.J. Dillon, who they brought back on a somewhat cheap contract, could be involved as well. Of course, those guys are not going to see 0% of the snaps. But I believe that people are reading into this thinking that the rookie Marshawn Lloyd, and maybe it does happen. We'll see what the camp reports happen in the preseason. We'll update if we have to change our take. We won't get locked into anything. But I think people are seeing these quotes and just saying that, oh, Marshawn Lloyd's going to be in like a split backfield, meaning like a 50-50 backfield instead of what's probably going to happen closer to like a 70-30. And let's not forget, a lot of people are pointing, oh, Josh Jacobs was terrible last year. He played on a terrible offense with bad quarterbacks, and he saw the most defenders in the box on average. 7.2 defenders in the box on average. There's only 11 guys on defense, and over 7 on average were in the box because they did not have any fear of the passing game last year with the Raiders and Aiden O'Connell and Brian Hoyer for a game and Jimmy G. But that should change this year, assuming Jordan Love continues his great play from last year down the stretch where he was a borderline top 5 quarterback, if not a top 5 quarterback in the league, finished 2nd in passing touchdowns, wasn't turning the ball over, was highly efficient as a downfield passer as well. If that continues, teams are going to have to respect the passing game, which opens up the running game for all these running backs, including the number 1 back, Josh Jacobs. And the last time that he was on a team that could throw the ball downfield, had a respectable quarterback in Derek Carr in 2022, well, what does he do? He goes out there and he puts up over 1,600 rushing yards, not too shabby. So right now, Josh Jacobs goes 39th overall. You can see right here at the top of the fantasy blueprint, he's my 28th overall player. So I'm about a round ahead of him. I think that he's a solid early 3rd round pick. If you get him in the 4th round, that's great. But here's the thing. I'd rather have Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco's a top 24 player. So if Pacheco's off the board, that's where you can start to look for Jacobs if you're looking for one in round 4. Now, speaking of the Packers and Jacobs being on that team and a guy that we mentioned left that team, let's talk about the Packers' former running back. I think I called him the Packers right there. Pause. Okay, well, let's go back to the video here in Aaron Jones. We're going to talk about Aaron Jones. He's no longer a Packer, right? The former stud Green Bay Packer, the heart and soul of this team, you can say, especially last year down the stretch when they didn't have Aaron Rodgers anymore for the whole season. He kind of took on this new captain role, and then he gets shafted. Sort of the nature of the business. They said that they wanted him to take a big pay cut. Some people said it was only $1 million pay cut. Some people said it was 50%, and he kind of got bothered by this, and it makes sense. He's been so great for them. But now there are some concerns with Aaron Jones, and we'll go through all of them. The first one is easily a quarterback downgrade, in my opinion. Jordan Love showed to be great last year. It looks like his quarterback this year will be somewhat Sam Darnold probably to start the year. At some point, you expect the rookie J.J. McCarthy, so we're expecting a downgrade there in quarterback and potential overall offense. Now, I think that that's totally fair, and it allows some people to have concerns, but I think we should dive deeper because Kevin O'Connell is still the head coach here. They still have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. I trust Kevin O'Connell, one of the best coaches in the league, to still put up a quality offense that won't harm the backfield. So I think people being worried about that, it's not wrong, but I do think it's a mistake if you're overblowing it. And then the other reason why a lot of people are concerned right now, and there's a couple more after this, is, well, now he's in a running back with Ty Chandler. And Ty Chandler last year in his second year after coming off of an injury from his rookie year looked really good. Basically was stealing the job from Alexander Mattison, who stunk. It kind of took him a little while to break break out because Cam Akers was then brought to the team, but then ends up getting hurt. And Tyler Chandler breaks out down the stretch. He looks great. Now he's entering year 3, and he looked like he was going to be the guy. The Vikings cut Alexander Mattison. They were saying all the positive things about Ty Chandler, but then unexpectedly, the Packers cut Aaron Jones, and the Vikings' plans changed, and they signed Jones. And in my opinion, I believe that Jones is the clear 1A, like more so than what Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears are dealing with in Tennessee. I think it's clearly Jones, and yeah, Tajay Spears is talented and will be involved, but he's the clear 2. Now, one thing that could limit that, and a lot of people, including myself, had pointed out, is that Aaron Jones is coming off of injuries, and he's going to be turning 30 in December this year. He's coming off of not only a knee strain, so you're getting some muscle strains here, but the hamstring strain as well. So this is a concern, but I think people are blowing it a little bit out of proportion. Because outside of last year, this has been a guy who stayed relatively healthy. I mean, played in every single game in 2022, only missed 2 games in 2021, and in one of those games, they said that he could have played, but they were just trying to keep it safe with him. So it's not like he's been injured every single year. A guy like James Conner missing on average 4 games a year. Like Aaron Jones, maybe he's missing a game or 2 most of his seasons outside of last year. And when he was on the field last year, he was still great. It's not like he's this aging back who's falling apart. Jones ranked 14th in yards per touch and averaged over 125 yards per game his final 5 games. Now, one area where he wasn't great last year was breaking tackles. He ranked 30th in broken tackles per touch. That's due great. And breakaway runs of 10 plus yards. He only ranked 38th in that based on his overall carries. But this was still a guy who was able to win based off of his vision, his instincts, right? His decision making to just go quick, and his footwork. It was still all there. Also, his pass catching ability was a huge help. And I think it's telling that the Minnesota Vikings the next morning signed Aaron Jones. It wasn't like, oh, he was on the waiver wire for a day or 2. No, teams knew that this guy was still special. He got cut the night before, like 4 p.m. or something, and the next morning he signed. And it makes sense because the Vikings more than anybody know how good this guy is. They faced him 11 times since he's entered the NFL, and with his receiving yards and rushing yards, he's averaged over 90 total yards per game against them. Just an absolute monster. So here's why I think people are wrong about Aaron Jones, because if he stays healthy this year, if he plays in 15 games, even 14 games, he's going to easily crush his ADP right now of 67th overall. He's my 56th overall player, so I'm 11 spots ahead of the market. Again, just like I like Tajay Spears, even though I like Tony Pollard, I also like Ty Chandler because he goes way later than Aaron Jones. I mean, you can continue to scroll for so long here, and you're still not going to get to Ty Chandler. It's probably going to be, let's see, 4 or 5 rounds. It's even more than that. Ty Chandler goes 141st overall, so he's going like 6, 7, 8 rounds later. So yeah, if you end up not getting Aaron Jones, then sure, Ty Chandler later on is fine. I'm not really too keen on getting both of them. I'm not the biggest fan of handcuffs in my opinion all that much, but I think that both guys are great options this year, and I think they're both being undersold right now in the market. Now, this next guy, I've really only heard not favorable things this offseason, and it's really confusing me. But before I tell you about that player, let me tell you about the Fantasy Blueprint, which thousands of you have already gotten this year, so I appreciate you, and I'm hoping you're enjoying the tool so far. But if you want to win your fantasy league, you come right here to this link in the description below. You click the button, and it has a couple of options to get the blueprint completely risk-free this year for just a $10 one-time payment offer if you can do it through these routes, and you get it for the entire year, every single week during the season leading up to your draft, and it's updated. And if you caught that, I said that it's risk-free. If you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I just give you that one-time payment of $10 right back, assuming you go through one of our partner sites. If those don't work for you, there's another option on that page at the bottom as well. 100% risk-free. You don't make your playoffs, you get your money back. If you want to get your fantasy blueprint and join the thousands of other people who have used it in the past and this year, over 10,000 people, by the way, click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on the screen. Now, that player that I talked about that I said I can't believe everybody's only saying bad things, and that, yes, that's all I've personally seen, it's James Cook, who a lot of people seem to have forgotten what he did last year. Based on the way that I hear people talking about him when he was like a 5th to 6th to 7th round pick last year, I'm assuming, okay, this guy probably stunk. But if you played fantasy last year or you just paid attention at all, you know that James Cook didn't stink, okay? He had to deal with 2 veterans, Damian Harris and Latavius Murray there, and he was still able to earn 14 carries per game, top 10 in the NFL very quietly, and over 3 targets per game. So he's getting over 17 opportunities per game, but that's not all. He was actually very productive on this usage. He ranked 4th in total rushing yards last year, 8th in total receiving yards, putting up over 1,500 yards in his second season while splitting a backfield for the first half of the year. But that's not all. Let me keep going. Cook finished 4th in yards per touch, 6th in yards per route run, and 10th in opportunities. So in his second season ever, when he still wasn't getting the workhorse usage for the first half of the year, he ends up putting up a top 20 finish on 1,500 total yards. What's not to like? Well, I mean, if you think about this a little bit more, I kind of get it. Like, he had so many yards, 1,500 total yards, and he still barely cracked the top 20 because he didn't have an elite role in the red zone at scoring touchdowns and an elite role as a receiver in catching passes. Like, it's not like he's bad in either of these areas. He had 44 catches last year, but that's just 17th in the NFL. Okay, average for a starting running back, especially one that played every single game. He had 38 red zone touches, maybe better than you expected when he was splitting a backfield with multiple running backs and Josh Allen, the quarterback, but still just 22nd in the league. So you're talking about this cheat code usage to score touchdowns and catch passes. It's not terrible, but it's not great. That's why you're not seeing him crack the top 10 last year based on all that yardage. And you really want your running back to have that cheat code usage if you're taking him in like the second or third round of your fantasy draft. But hold up, wait a minute. Let's put some facts up in it. You can see right here, James Cook is going 45th overall. So he's going as a late 4th round pick, a 5th round pick. In some leagues, if you're in an 8-team league, he's going as a 6th round pick, but overall 4th or 5th round pick. So you don't really need that elite red zone and passing game usage, but he still had both of it last year. And now those other two veteran running backs are gone, and Stephon Diggs is gone, and Gabe Davis is gone. So they kind of need some more passing game help. And the only running back the Bills signed was Darrington Evans to replace Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. Okay, I'm not really worried about Darrington Evans. This is like his 3rd or his 4th team in as many years in the NFL. But the big one was they drafted a 4th round running back in Ray Davis out of Kentucky. And Ray Davis right now will compete with Ty Johnson and Darrington Evans to be the running back 2 on this team. Ray Davis has a very inspirational story. This guy was homeless at 12 years old and basically just a lot of triumph and a lot of just achievements, and he ends up now making it to the NFL. If you're not familiar with Davis, he spent a bunch of years in college, and last year was his best season at Kentucky. Over 1,000 rushing yards, was very efficient, 20 touchdowns, and showed that he can catch passes. Each of the last 2 years having 29 receptions, putting up a decent amount of receiving yards. This right here, 10% target share. He earned 10% of his team's targets. Anything above like 7%, 6.5% in college is good. Anything above 10% is great. So we know that he's a solid pass catcher, can be productive. He's kind of a veteran, has the leadership. The downsides are he's not an elite athlete, and his breaking tackle ability is questionable. So people want to just slide him in as the automatic running back 2 because people love rookies, their recent investment. But Ty Johnson was good for this team last year. Wouldn't be shocked if he's involved at all. We kind of have to see what the reports say, but this is what it's going to come down to. If James Cook can improve and earn more of the 3rd down usage, which he should be out there for passing downs, but to pass protect for Josh Allen, if he could put on some weight, if he can improve in that area, then he's going to hold off the rookie Ray Davis. He's going to hold off Ty Johnson. Hopefully he can hold off Darrington Evans in that area as well, and he's going to earn more 3rd down snaps, which lead to more snaps in the red zone, and which definitely lead to more potential checkdowns and receptions. But let's just say that doesn't happen. Let's say he keeps the same role as last year, where he's going to be seeing, 16 to 17 touches a game, usage in the passing and in backfield, and he still has 6 touchdowns. Okay, well then he's finishing as a top 20 back. And to get a top 20 back is like his worst case scenario as the 47th overall pick. So a 4th or a 5th round pick in drafts right now is great. He's my 30th overall player. I think he's a top 30 player. I'm 17 spots ahead of the market because I think he's being drafted at his worst case scenario right now. If the touchdowns and or the receptions, imagine both of them improve, he'll be a top 15 to top 12 back. And if they both improve, he'll be a top 10 back. So I think everybody has it wrong on James Cook right now. Just kind of everybody's saying, oh, is it going to be Ty Johnson, Ray Davis? Who's taking it? Josh Allen's going to take all the touchdowns. No, I think that James Cook is going to have a good role and it might only get better. Next up, let's talk about a rookie in Blake Corm, who's like the most talked about rookie running back so far this offseason, which is interesting because there was 2 other running backs in Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson taken ahead of him, and both of those guys are profiling out to have a better rookie season in terms of fantasy. Or at least they should be getting more opportunity right away. Let's break down why everyone's talking about Blake Corm. Well, a lot of people believe that Kyren Williams wasn't good last year, and that might sound crazy to you, and I would agree. You're in the right. But in fantasy, obviously, he was great. He scored a lot of points, number 2 overall in fantasy points per game. But in real life, people are saying, he wasn't all that good. It was just because he had no competition. He was dealing with Zach Evans and Ronnie Rivers last year. And look, I would agree on that standpoint. If you're not going to have competition, it's easier to produce, both in real life and fantasy. Earn more opportunities if you're the only running back your coaches trust. But that doesn't mean he wasn't good, because he was. He was great in real life. Pass protection, pass catching ability, breaking tackles. What more can you ask for from a running back? And heck, as a smaller running back, it's not like his red zone role was terrible either. You see Kyren Williams right here. If we scroll over, these right here, these 27 carries were how many carries he got inside the 5-yard line. So that's like the goal line. He scored on 8 of those. So he scored like a third of the time, which is about average for a guy seeing this level of volume, especially nice for a guy who's only like 200 pounds. Okay, well now there's some actual competition back there. I agree with everybody else. Blake Corm is much better than Ronnie Rivers and Zach Evans, who were in the backfield last year. If you're not familiar, Corm has spent the last 4 years in college at Michigan, where in the last 3 seasons, 2021, 2022 and on, he's been one of the best running backs you'll see. In 2022, he had his big year of over 1,400 rushing yards. Would have came out in the NFL draft last year, but he ends up getting a knee injury, so he comes back, he returns, and then he wins a conference championship or a college football championship, going for over 1,100 yards, adding receiving yards as well. And this was while kind of recovering from that knee injury, so it took him a little while to start the year, which is why the yardage was a little lower. Now, what is Corm known for outside of just picking up rushing yards in college? Well, he has elite agility, he's great between the tackles, and his vision and contact balance is phenomenal. Now, the downsides that some people will point to is this right here. He's only 205 pounds and 5'8". We don't really see a lot of 5'8" running backs. You're talking about like Doug Martin. A lot of them don't come out. That doesn't mean that Corm can't be productive. It's just the fact that a lot of these guys just get weeded out at different points in the process for just not having the proper for size or speed or ability, but so far Corm at a major program in college against the toughest competition you can find, he's shown that he can handle it. So Corm is in this video because I think everybody's overvaluing him right now. I think that they're just kind of writing off Kyren Williams, saying that he's not a good running back, which is just absolutely crazy. Now that doesn't mean that Blake Corum's not a good running back. We just gave you a bunch of reasons as to why he was. And another reason why people are hopping off of Kyren Williams is this foot issue that he has right now. Missed all of OTAs. They're hoping that he'll be back, and they basically said that he'll be back for camp. Sean McVay has basically said that there's nothing to be concerned about. He's going to be back. We expect him to be ready for camp. You can see down here. Now the problem is this is Kyren Williams' third foot issue in the past 2 years, so you got a little bit worried there. But assuming he's back for camp, and this is what Sean McVay and the Rams do. They don't let their players, if there's any concerns at all, they don't let them participate in preseason, OTAs, camp. They just say, hey, just get healthy. And especially in preseason, they sit their first team and usually their second team offense. But there's no doubt about it that Kyren being out for OTAs and now parts of practice is going to help a rookie in Blake Corm. Anytime you can get more first team reps and get more comfortability and trust with the first team offense and your coaches, that's great. So yeah, this is a positive for Corm and in kind of just directly a negative in that aspect for Kyren Williams. All of this can be true. All of these things that we've said could be true, and Blake Corm can be tougher competition and earn more usage than Kyren Williams did last year, but it could still not ultimately matter for fantasy football because Kyren Williams earned 84% of the snaps last year, the most of any running back in the NFL. Even if this number drops to 70% of the snaps, he's still a solid pick as a top 20 pick in drafts, and that means that Corm's only seeing 30% of the snaps. Okay, maybe it rises to 34 to 40% for Corm at some point in the season. If Kyren Williams is healthy, his pass protection, trust that they have in him, knowing the system, ability to catch passes, break, all these things that are great for him, I just don't see why he's not going to be out there. Outside of the injury concerns, but you can say that for any running back. There used to be injury or concerns with Christian McCaffrey in the past, and now those have been gone, right? You can say this about any running back, the injury concerns. I'm not worried about it, assuming he's healthy to start the year, which right now he's trending and should be. Now, I actually have one bonus running back that I think everybody has the wrong opinion on right now. But before we get there, over 60% of people who watch these videos, and that might be you, are not subscribed. It only takes 2 seconds. Most people just don't even remember. They're watching on their TV. I get it. I forget a lot of the times too, but it really helps the channel if you subscribe. I want to get that number closer to 50% by the time the season starts. So I appreciate if you could hit that subscribe button. Now that bonus player is going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And look, before everybody starts laughing, I think everybody is wrong on him because they're just forgetting about him. People are laughing him off. They're not realizing what happened this offseason that actually really benefited Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is a guy who doesn't get drafted in most drafts right now. He goes as the 203rd overall player. Right now, he's currently going in drafts in the 18th round after guys like Deontay Foreman, who's at best the running back 3 on his team once Nick Chubb is back. After Audric Estime, a 5th round rookie, who's at best probably the number 3 running back on a worse offense than the Chiefs. He's even going after Ben Sinnott, who Ben Sinnott, in my opinion, is a tight end who's going to be behind Zach Evans to start the season in Washington, and he's more of like this hybrid tight end, might even play some fullback. Crazy. Now, these are all mistakes, and I get it. Drafting Clyde Edwards-Helaire with your last pick or having him on your roster isn't sexy based on what's happened in years past with him. But the Kansas City Chiefs like him. They like him a lot. So does Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is the guy years ago who said to go out and draft him with the 32nd overall pick in the first round. And look, he doesn't have any competition behind Isaiah Pacheco. He beat out Deneric Prince last year. It's going to happen again. Keontae Ingram, a newcomer, not really concerning. A rugby player in Luis Reese-Zammit. Some people are getting excited for people who watched rugby. It makes sense to know a player. Now he's in the NFL and want to root for him. He's still not a guy who went to LSU like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, produced at a high level, was a first-round pick, and had great stretches in at times in the NFL as well. Here's the thing. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not going to threaten Isaiah Pacheco. He hasn't in the past. He lost his job to Pacheco in the past, so I'm not worried about that. He knows that he's going to be a part-time player. And he was completely fine in this role last year, seeing 23% of the snaps. You scroll over here, and he was seeing 4.7 carries per game, 1.5 targets per game, so you're getting like 6-7 opportunities per game. That's not something that you want to be rostering in terms of, oh, this guy's going to win me my league. No, you want to be rostering him because in the 18th round of the drafts, those wide receiver 4 and 5s on teams and quarterbacks that stink and tight ends that stink aren't worth it. You want running backs that can have some upside if something happens to a guy in front of them. And we're going to knock on wood and not wish injury on any running back, and it kind of feels weird for the next word out of my mouth to be but, right? Like we're talking about injury, but I'll just leave it at this. Isaiah Pacheco runs like a madman. You've seen him run. He runs like a madman, and he leaves himself open to big hits. If he misses a game or 2 or 3, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who got re-signed this offseason by the team, is sliding right in as the trusted veteran to start to see usage, and in the 18th round, 2 or 3 starts can win you a week and can help you get to the playoffs. That's a little tip I'll leave you with. In the last round of your drafts, just shoot for upside at the running back position. All the other positions, it's hard for those guys to pay off that late, but the running back position, all it takes is one injury in front of them, especially for a guy in the Kansas City Chiefs like Pacheco. Check that, a guy in the Kansas City Chiefs called Clyde Edwards-Helaire, CEH. Now, these have been the running backs that I believe everybody is wrong on right now, but if you want to see my top 24 overall players, the guys that you just can't miss. You can't miss on these guys in drafts. You have to nail your first 2 rounds. Well, check out this video right here to see exactly who the 24 best players in fantasy are, and you should be drafting.